I am back and we are already at the end of January. I managed to read 7, almost 8 books during the month, so I'm going to run through all of them and give you my spoiler-free thoughts and tell you whether I think you should read them or not. So, without further ado, let's get into all of the books that I finished in January. To kick us off, I started a much-loved series reread that I have been planning to do forever, and that is The Dresden Files. Book 1 is Stormfront, and this follows Harry Dresden, and he's a wizard detective. Harry in this book gets a call from Murphy, who is in the Special Investigations Unit. He works as a consultant for Murphy and the police on solving supernatural crimes. So he comes along to this really odd crime scene where these two bodies have had basically their hearts ripped out, and he's like, definitely magic is at play here. Not a very nice magic, a very dark magic. And so while he's trying to investigate this, a few other players come into the story, and you get to see how powerful and magical he is, but also in a sense how lonely he is, and how he's trying to rekindle connections and just take down bad guys. And it's such a cinematic book, and I just loved every second of it. And rereading this made me just reappreciate all of the characters that we are introduced to in this book, because a lot of them that we get to see are key players as the series goes on. So it feels like a very clever first book from Jim Butcher in his Dresden Files series, which is an urban fantasy series too, if I haven't said it already. Urban fantasy is magic but set in like a relatable world. So it's fantasy in an urban setting, I guess, and with the wizard detective aspect with supernatural creatures. Obviously this is an urban fantasy. I gave this, if you couldn't guess, a 5 stars, and I adored my reread. Also, Dave and I did a spoiler chat, like a Dresden Files podcast almost. So every time I reread one of these, I'm going to be chatting with Dave as well, because we both read up to a certain point in this series and then we just fell off the bandwagon and life just got too busy, so we didn't continue it, and that was like 2.5 years ago. Now I'm finally continuing it, and we are chatting as I make my way through each of the books. It's an absolute delight, and I'm so enjoying my rereads of these. Then to break it up, I read a romance, well, an ice hockey romance book, which has been doing the rounds, called Icebreaker. This is about Stacy, who is named Anastasia. Stacy is her nickname, and she is wanting to become an Olympic figure skater. Her love interest is named Nate Hawkins, and he is the captain of the hockey team. So he's looking to continue hockey as a career. She's looking to continue figure skating as a career. And then Stacy's partner, Aaron, her skating partner, they are trying to get doubles into the Olympics. So they are practicing really hard. But one day someone has sabotaged their ice hockey rink, and so the figure skaters have to share with the ice hockey players and work out their schedules. And so Stacy and Nate collide, and their worlds very much intersperse with college parties and everyone getting to know each other. But amongst that, you have Aaron's jealousy of wanting Stacy all to himself so that he can become this figure skater for the Olympics, and you see her development as well, which I really appreciated, and that she often sees a therapist for different challenges in her life. And I appreciated that while this was steamy and very romantic, it also had key moments in here that made you realize there is significant character development. One of those key moments that I'm talking about that are emotionally intelligent and introspective is when Stacy said recovery isn't about winning, recovery is about learning, which I just thought was fantastic to see in a romance book. And there's also something that I hate in romance books, when they do the third act breakup. So obviously there are challenges throughout the story. You've got act 1 and then act 2 when the characters are usually together and they're building up towards something. Then in act 3 there is a cataclysmic like plot breaking, and the characters usually result in breaking up with each other, and then at the end of the book, because it's a romance, they get back together, because you can't have a romance book necessarily that has the unhappy ending. If you're going into rom-com romance, you're expecting it to be happy, and you know, this was. And I appreciated that the third act breakup wasn't a breaking up literally of the couple. I hate it when that happens. I'm like, you guys have stuck together for this long, and now like one thing is you're undoing. Just communicate about it. And these characters were fantastic at communicating, which is what I loved about this book so much. So basically I'm a sap because I teared up a couple of times at this book, and I just really enjoyed myself. It was sexy and sweet and wholesome, and I didn't expect to love it so much. There were a few things about the ending that are personally not my cup of tea, so while I enjoyed a lot of the stuff in this book, I don't necessarily see it as a 5 stars, but I rated it 4, which for a romance book is really high, and I'm really happy that I read and enjoyed this one, and I gave Ice Hockey Romance a chance. Then I finished a novella by Seanan Maguire, which is her latest installment. I think it's book 7 in the Wayward Children series called Mislaid in Parts Half Known, and I have a whole separate spoiler-free review of that book. So I'm just going to say here that it follows Antsy, and Antsy can find anything, and because she can find anything, she manages to find the school that exists in this world for all the kids who go through doorways and then struggle to assimilate. She finds that school, but everyone at the school realizes that she can find things, and a lot of them want her to find their particular doorway, and she's like, I can't stay here, so she has to leave. And she leaves with a few friends, and then they go on a quest together. And while I liked the different quest elements, it felt like it was just too busy for a novella, and I keep saying book when I'm referring to this installment, just because it seems like it needed a lot more space to flesh everything out that it was trying to do. There were a lot of asides to different side characters, and while I really enjoyed seeing them again, it was very frustrating to not feel like something was fully fleshed out and then closed off properly. It just felt like there were a lot of side quests almost to this main quest, and all of the side quests weren't really that fulfilling, which was a bit disappointing, but I really liked the introspection and the support of these characters, and that's kind of what brought this story to its saving grace for me. I really liked also some of the world building. We got a little bit more tidbits in here than we have so far across the series, and I like how this is set up pieces for the final book in the series. I don't love that it was almost like a stepping stone to become what the final book will be, but I liked seeing the magic and the support, like I said. So while it wasn't the best in her series, I still really enjoyed it, and I'm sitting on my 4-star rating. Then in preparation for reading the third and final book in this series, I reread The Atlas Paradox, and I did a recap of the Atlas 6 and the Atlas Paradox plot points to prepare you for the Atlas Complex. I rated this 4.5 stars, which was the same rating that I gave it the first time I read through. The outcomes in this book were cataclysmic. It was so cool. So you have 6 initiates. In the first book by Atlas Blakely, they are approached, and he says you can come to study at the Great Alexandrian Society, and we have access to these archives, and these archives can basically grant you any knowledge you would think about in order to pursue your personal Median capabilities. Medians are magic users. There are magic users present in society in this world. So when these 6 initiates who are Medians come to this secret society to study, they realize how revered this society is, and it's how power corrupts them and what they would do for power as well. The third book is going to be epic. I can just feel it, and I'm so excited about it. This was 4.5, maybe the sequel will be 4.5 as well. If not, might be a 5. I'm really hoping that it's a 5. But anyhow, I obviously enjoyed this enough to reread it, so yes, I would recommend this series if you like dark academia. Then I reread another favourite because apparently my 2024 is involving a lot of rereads, but I reread Wolfsong by TJ Klune because the third book is coming out in February. And this is one of my favourite books of all time, so it was about time that I reread it. And honestly, the only thing that I have in my notes is I have cried 3 times and I still have 100 pages to go. That is all I wrote about this. But as for a plot, we follow Ox as he is a kid and then he grows up in this small town of Green Creek. And when Ox is a really young child, his father says he's going to get knocked back. People aren't going to respect him because he's a bit slower, and people say, oh, he's slow like an ox. So he gets bullied a lot, but he's also so clever and genuine, and he just wants to make connections with people and for people to give him a chance. And so his father says all this to him that's quite negative, and then his father leaves. His mother obviously is still around, and she forms a great family bond for him and support for him. But then the Bennett family move in across the road, and if you couldn't guess from the title of the book, the Bennett family are not normal. They are werewolves. This is a fantastic, again, an urban fantasy book like the Dresden Files, but instead of the Dresden Files, this builds up the characters in a very small localized setting that doesn't have really high stakes, but there is also an intense plot happening. And I liked so much the characters in this book. They felt so real to me. They've got so much heart and so much growth. And I loved this the second time around because when I first read it, I was like, what is getting under your skin so much? Like, just forgive who you need to forgive and talk to who you need to talk to, Ox. Like, what is going on? But the second time I read through, I could really see Ox's vulnerability and his fear of being abandoned. And while that did come through in my first read, I really just had my heart broken all over again reading it for a second time. So this was just so chilling, and vulnerable and warm and heartfelt and funny as well. There were so many moments that I was giggling over the dialogue, and I just loved the characters so much. It's also a male-male romance as well. It was so good, and I obviously enjoyed this very much. It was a 5-star book, and this is one that I would highly recommend you try out. Then I finished my second Dresden book, and that was Full Moon, which is about, again, Harry Dresden, our wizard detective. It's set a month after the first book, and in this one he gets approached by Murphy again, and she's like, something is going on, it is very gruesome, and I need your help solving this because bodies keep popping up over the full moon. I don't know what's going on. And he's like, well, we got some werewolves on our hands. And I loved the lore of this book and how it explored werewolves, because I've not seen it done in this way before, and it was just really cool and refreshing to see. This was also a bit gruesome because obviously werewolves, but I haven't read this, like I said, for more than 2.5 years, and I still remembered a pivotal action scene in this. That is how clear the action sequences in this book are written. It is how focused this author is on how he wants to tell his story, and it's also kind of funny too because the dialogue just makes me laugh a lot. So I loved the intensity of this book. I loved the fast-paced nature, but unlike the first book, this one wasn't as tight to me. So it does get a 4 stars instead of a 5, but it's still a very high and well-renowned 4 stars. And again, kind of like Ox, actually, you get to see Dresden and his trust issues in this book, and how in the past he's had connections just cut off from him. I don't want to get into spoilers, so I'm being as vague as possible. Because of those cut connections, he's really struggling to trust again in this book. So one of the things that I got really frustrated about in my first read through was he's obviously working with Murphy, and she knows about werewolves. Like, he prepared a report for her so she's prepared and she can track down who this murderer is that's on the loose. But he also just doesn't tell her certain integral details about the magical world, and that the Council of Wizards exists, and that there are ramifications for people who commit crimes and magic, and they will hold them accountable. Murphy doesn't know any of this, and she doesn't know a lot about the Fey world and about supernatural creatures. So the fact that Dresden just prepared this report for her and was like, this is what werewolves are, he's giving her information but not giving her a whole lot of information. And I'm like, why is this communication happening, Dresden? Like, just talk to her, work it out. But it turned out that there was a lot of subtext I missed in the first read through. So reading through this again has been absolutely incredible, because I saw how scared Dresden was and how alone he felt and how he hasn't trusted anyone for a long time. So he really relies on just himself to fix things. Even though he knows he can trust Murphy, of course, he doesn't trust her to the full extent that he used to trust people, because they've turned on him in the past. And he doesn't want that, not necessarily to happen again, but he doesn't want people to be put at risk because of the things that he knows. So I loved seeing that develop in this book, and I just love the action sequences. Like I said, it was just so amazing. Like I was watching a movie in my head. Jim Butcher really knows how to make all of his imagination clear to you. It had such clarity, and I just loved it so much. Then I no longer have it with me, unfortunately, which tells you pretty much all you need to know. But I read The Sunlit Man by Brandon Sanderson, which is his final Kickstarter release of 2023. The Sunlit Man follows Nomad, and Nomad is like a lone wanderer traveler. He randomly appears on this world and he doesn't want to stay, he wants to skip off world, but he doesn't have enough power to do that. And on this world they have what are called sun hearts, and the sun on this world is so powerful that if you are exposed to its light, it will burn you to a crisp. So the people on this world are always moving in order to survive, but if you leave a person out in the sun, then they are burned to a crisp, and what is left over is called their sun heart. So it's got their soul imbued. The way that magic works in this planet, in this world, is things are highly invested, which means they have a lot of imbued power, but investiture always comes with rules. And so in that sense, it had a lot of throwbacks to the Stormlight Archive, because it's talking about being invested and investiture. And this protagonist has a tool called Ox, or auxiliary, and auxiliary can manifest as like a crowbar. He used to be able to manifest as a sword, and we know that it's a shard blade based on the magic system in the Stormlight Archive. I would say if you want to read The Sunlit Man, read the Stormlight Archive first. first, because this had a few spoilers for the Stormlight Archive, and you're going to be left in the dark a lot, pun not intended, about the magic system on this planet if you haven't read the Stormlight Archive, because it leverages a lot of prior world building that Sanderson has done. But as for the plot of the Sunlit Man, he's obviously appeared on this world, he doesn't want to stick around, but he's got to find out how to get more power. So he tries to figure out how to imbue himself with the magic of like the Sun Heart. And while he's doing that, he runs across the locals who are at war and trying to survive the Cinder King's power, I guess. He is harvesting people's Sun Hearts and imbuing his own power. So he's highly invested, he's very powerful, and these survivors have stolen a key magical item from this guy to unlock this sanctuary and hopefully go off-world and find a place for these survivors to live that aren't exposed to the Cinder King. And this guy, Nomad, accidentally stumbles into all of this. So while I liked generally the world building and the plot, I didn't love all of the characters necessarily, and I think that's just not a strength of Sanderson's Kickstarters. I'm just not connecting to the characters really. I want a series like Mistborn or Stormlight where you really get to sit with one character and see them grow, and you did see Nomad go through a story arc in this, but while it was enjoyable, it's actually my favorite of all of the Kickstarter books. So a lot of people were right, this is the one that I enjoyed the most. It's just not a book by Sanderson that I enjoyed the most out of everything, if that makes sense. So I would really strongly recommend reading the Stormlight Archive instead, because all through the Sunlit Man I just wanted to go back and reread the Stormlight Archive, and I think that's what I might end up doing anyway. So it just made me think of Stormlight, and I'm like, why am I reading this, which is like subpar, when I could be reading Stormlight instead? I guess that's my review of the Sunlit Man. Read Stormlight instead. So I'm just, yeah, a bit regretful that I bought into the Kickstarter books, but I was hoping they would be the quality of like Mistborn and Stormlight, and they really were not. This is the only one that I rated like 3 stars. Oh, Tressa's are 3 stars, but the others were 2 stars. So, you know, I'm just glad that I've done that and got it out of my way, and it's not on my to be read pile anymore. Now, those are the books I read, which are only 7, and I did say that I'd read 8 in January. So I've almost finished The Lord of Stariel, which is an audiobook, and because it's a Fae audiobook, I don't always love fairies, but in this book it's actually doing pretty well. And our protagonist in this book is coming back to the family, the massive family estate of Stariel, because her father has passed away, and they are having a funeral for him and then a choosing ceremony of who will be the next Lord of Stariel. And I like how this protagonist is just so emotionally intelligent. She doesn't go into polite societal conversations and then just get caught up or gets frustrated or just doesn't communicate things. She recognizes that people are trying to do a certain thing, and she either plays into it or goes, yeah, I don't want to be part of this, and like steps away from it. She really just knows herself, and I really like seeing that. It's so refreshing. I also just love the dynamics of her and her family, and her butler, who she's kept in touch with the entire time that she's been away from the estate for 6 years. So because of him, she's had updates, so she kind of knows roughly what's going on with the family estate, and you see her interacting with people. It's almost like a small town romance, because this character has been away for so long and is now coming back to like the familiar but the unknown. And you've got Wynne, I guess the butler or the house master, and he's not a family member. He was adopted by the family a long time ago, and he's become their butler. And just seeing their dynamics, I'm like, oh, these guys are in love, and I'm so excited. But I don't know if this is a series or if it's a companion series, and I'll find out later, because I've got like 2 hours of the audiobook to go. But it's solidly sitting at a 4 stars, and I did not expect to rate this above a 3. So I am very pleasantly surprised by this. I didn't think it would be my thing, but it's turning out really, yes, it is my thing, and I'm really enjoying it. I love the tension, I love the slow burn, and I love the character development, the dialogue, the interactions, and what has been teased and foreshadowed so far. I'm looking forward to seeing what the ending does. I'm just really excited about this book, which I'm very pleasantly surprised by. And then finally, of course, another book that I am currently reading is Raven Song, which is the sequel to Wolf Song. I just love this so much. I'm not telling you what this is about because it is the sequel, and it follows characters from our first book, not directly Ox and Joe, but it follows adjacent characters to them. So yes, I obviously am loving this book. The first time around I gave it 5 stars. I've already become really like emotionally embroiled in this story, so I have no doubt that I'm going to give it 5 stars as well. And Heart Song comes out in, less than a week on the day that I'm I'm filming this, so I need to finish this in time for Heartsong to come out, and then I can read Heartsong and start the Atlas Complex, which is going to wrap up some series ongoing nicely that I've got at the moment. So that brings me to the end of my January wrap up. I guess go and check out my February to be read video if you want to see what else I'm planning to read during the month of February. But as for January, thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know how many books you read during the month of January. I would love to know, but thank you again so much for watching. I'll come chat to you in the comments below, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.